I'm going to try to explain why the Russians are underperforming so severely militarily. If you don't know me, my name is Darren Gertis. I am a professor. I've been tracking what's been going on in Ukraine nearly since the beginning. Wrote an ebook on Zelensky, and I've done more than 100 videos daily about what's going on in Ukraine. If you like this, please consider subscribing. If you want to spread this, click like, and it'll tell the YouTube algorithm, hey, people like this, so maybe I should spread this elsewhere. Okay, here's where we are. We're talking about the Russians underperforming, and Putin is really in a bad place right now where he's got to figure out, like, what do I do next? And that's because of their underperformance. So let's look at this. There's a brilliant article here. Now, I just went over, if you, and I'm going to only touch on it very briefly. Go back one if you haven't watched the last video, because I talk about what the UK Ministry of Defense and the Institute for the Study of War have said about Russians' underperformance in the last day or so. So I'm going to assume that you already are accepting that they're underperforming. If not, go back and watch that last video. Okay, Russia's underperforming military capability may be the key to its downfall. Okay, this article says it's highly unlikely that the Russian military can recover from its increasingly terminal trajectory on the battlefield, though its defeat will take time. So here's a couple of things to understand from there. One, they keep spiraling down, and that's because they can't seem to figure out where their priorities are. So they're fighting in Kharkiv, they're fighting in Kherson, and they're fighting in Donbass, right? There's a 500 kilometer line that they got to figure out, like, where, like, front line is very long. And the Ukrainians can seize any part of that battlefield that they want and fight there, which is what they did in Kharkiv. And the Russians aren't figuring out, like, maybe we ought to reinforce this, or maybe, no, they want all three. It's like the monkey that has their hand in the jar, and they grab the thing in the jar, and then they can't get their hand out, because if they simply let go of one thing, they could get their hand out and maybe seize another. Okay, the military loves its acronyms, and here is .MLPF. It's .MILP or .milf or something like that. And sometimes there's an extra P on there. It stands for Doctrine, Organization, Training, Material, Leadership, Education, Personnel and Facilities, and sometimes Policy. Okay, so Russian strengths, and they do have certain strengths, include Russian doctrine, the theory of how the army should fight, which is clear, precise, and well evidenced, conceptually elegant, except when it actually goes into battle, as opposed to here's how it ought to work. Sometimes the theory doesn't match the practice, and they don't know what to do at that point, because they don't, like, uh-oh, the textbook says this, but we're not actually in that, and what do we do? Russian materiel is generally exceptionally well designed, and it's adequately built. It's built well enough to do what it's supposed to do. The weaknesses of Russian materiel tends to be that it's inflexible. It's designed for a single purpose and a single task, and because of that, it's designed well for what it does, but if you have to use it for something else, it doesn't work so well. Now, all of these things tend to be leadership kind of issues, and I'm going to pull some of this out. The Russians have an efficient rail network optimized for the movement of combat equipment, and if you can use that network, great, they can get things there lightning quick. So moving things from Russia into Ukraine shouldn't be all that hard. That's one of the reasons that they're fighting for that area around Belgorod that I talked about in the last video as well. The factories to produce munitions, they're directly under government control, so they have no problem, like, refocusing what they need to refocus. Doesn't matter what else is going on. We can make this happen lickety-split. The strengths, however, do not compensate for the significant shortcomings. Okay, so there are some significant shortcomings. What are they? Russia's military was designed to fight short, high-intensity wars. Okay, that's different than the long slog. In the long slog, they're going to have a hard time. Without full national mobilization, it is too small, its units lack the logistical enablement, and its equipment is ill-suited for a protracted war. Okay, so there's a difference between being able to fight short and tense and being able to fight over the long haul. In the autumn of 2021, it's estimated a need for them to be deployed for 9 months. Okay, so this is last year. They figured, okay, how long are we going to actually be in Ukraine anyway? Well, we're going to capture Kyiv in 3 days. We're going to capture the rest of the country within 2 weeks. I mean, with this all-out blitzkrieg that we're adopting. And so we'll be there. Maybe we'll occupy for a few months, something along those lines. We'll have our referendums by the fall, be done, right? Didn't work out so well. So now they're reaching that limit. For the Ukrainians, by contrast, it's been organizing their military since 2014. Now, what do we mean since 2014? When the Russians invaded in both Donbass and in Crimea and annexed Crimea, the Ukrainians got very serious about being militarily prepared. And so they've been preparing since 2014 for this kind of war where they're going to really have to take it, it's going to be all out. One of the greatest deficiencies in the Russian military is leadership. Now, this is what I want to focus on because this is the love, my passion, right? The leadership. Okay. I built a master's in leadership, a minor in leadership. I'm right now building a bachelor's degree in leadership. And so this article sang to me, the leadership culture is dictatorial and enforced by fear. Think about it in your own life. If you ever worked for a dictator, he might have got things done, but nobody wanted to do anything more than they had to for him. Or if they were doing it because they were trying to suck up or maybe replace him or something along those lines. That's very different than when you're motivated by caring for your people. I wrote a paper that I'm going to be bringing to a conference next month about Zelensky as looking at academic theories of servant leadership, transformational, and empowering leadership. And he is masterful at all of these. We see almost the opposite culture in the Russian government and Russian army. Okay, corruption, however, wreaks havoc in Russian logistics. Fear of punishment has created a military in which soldiers will doggedly implement orders even when they no longer make sense. So right now, they're in Donbass trying to take Bakhmut. And so they're trying to take this real estate why are we trying to take that real estate when the fight's up there? Maybe we should be reorganizing, but we're following orders. And that's what you get in a culture of fear, as opposed to, like, if you really cared about your commanders, you would be trying to help them make better choices rather than just, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so there's just a very different cultural experience that leads to very different conclusions. Okay, poor leadership also means that Russia has serious problems with personnel. There's a limited career path for long-term soldiers. This leads to retention problems that have caused the Russian military to continue to depend upon conscripts. And so they're very heavily dependent on conscripts. And they're dependent on poorly trained conscripts who are going to go into a meat grinder, and it's going to gin up the statistics of Russians killed in the battle. And that's going to eventually, the longer that goes on, that's going to play out badly at home. Russia lacks young recruits. In the absence of any clear ideology or strong leadership in units, troops are largely unmotivated. Look at the difference between the motivation of the Ukrainians, who are very motivated, and the motivation of the Russians. The Russians are continually asking, and you see this in article after article, why are we even here? We're the Nazis. What are we here for? Why are we doing this? The Ukrainians know exactly why they're doing this. I explained this to my children because they were asking, like, what I don't understand. Why do you say that the Ukrainians have? So motivation is a force multiplier. If somebody breaks into my house and they want to steal my TV and my computer and whatever else they want to steal, they're motivated to take stuff. I am motivated to defend my family. And when I am defending my family, I'm going to fight like a rabid dog in order to defend them. I will die in the process if I need to in order to defend my family. That robber breaking into the house, he doesn't want to die. He just wants to get his stuff and get out. That's the difference. Okay, so there's a huge difference in motivation. Okay, where was I? In absence of any clear ideology, strong leadership, troops are largely unmotivated. Teams are unwilling to risk their lives for one another. There's not unit cohesion. They're not. It's not integrated the way it's supposed to be. The Russian infantry have therefore lacked offensive combat power because you need combat arms to be working together. The infantry and the artillery and the tanks and the air power. It all needs to be coordinated, and it's not. These problems have become worse as casualties have mounted. Casualties lead you to be less motivated than otherwise you would be. Perhaps one of the greatest weaknesses of the country's military system, though, is its training. So we're starting at the very beginning. At the beginning of the war, for example, there were fewer than 100 fully trained Russian pilots, and they had 317 combat aircraft. So they couldn't even get the number of aircraft into the air because they lack the pilots in order to do that. That's a big problem. They also started using trainers in active combat. So now they have a huge pipeline problem because they don't have enough trainers to train the next group. And so they'll be poorly trained or inadequately trained, and on and on. Second, Russian soldiers tend to receive training that is narrowly bounded to their assigned task. This makes troops inflexible. Okay, so if you're only focused on doing this particular thing, let's say you're a mortarman, you're only used to dropping the mortar and dropping the mortar and dropping the mortar, and you don't like in the Marine Corps, every Marine is a rifleman. So we know that a cook can be a rifleman and do a very good job at it, and so they're not cross trained in the same way. Third, Russians do most of their training in their units. As a result, as the units are in Ukraine, there is very little capability to train new recruits before they're sent into war. So they haven't merged together in a meaningful way like they need to. Okay, despite its equipment superiority to Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict, Russia is significantly underperforming against its potential. It actually, like we all thought, we looked at it on or not September, on February 24th, where I remember thinking, oh no, this is going to be really bad. Because I was looking at this and going, okay, the Russians are about 3 to 1 in population. They have much better, they have a much higher GDP, much greater military power. I mean, it's going to be bad, and it's not. I mean, it's really the Ukrainians have stood up and done a amazing job against what's supposed to be the second best army in the world is actually the second best army in Ukraine, and that's a very different picture. Now that Russian troops are outnumbered, unmotivated, and their equipment is deteriorating, the Kremlin's prospects are rapidly diminishing. And I just talked about that in the last video. So if you have not seen that video, please go back and look at that last video, because now the real question is for Putin, like, oh, okay, what do we do? Like, if you're Putin, how do you move forward? What can you do in order to, because he says he wants to end the war, and I know that he wants to end it on his terms, but what do you do? And that's what that last video was talking about. Hey, thanks for the time. If you appreciated this video, please consider subscribing. Please give me a like so that it can spread on the YouTube algorithm, and I thank you very much for that.